Do you ever feel like you're missing out on what God has for you? As if what God says it means to be a Christian and dwelt by the Spirit and the power that is in us is not something you're always walking into and living in the fullness of. As if the way the Bible paints what it means to love God and to have freedom to love other people and confidence in who we are because we're made in His image is not always the reality that you find yourself walking into. Do you ever feel like you're missing out on what God might even have for you personally? I think about a text in Ephesians chapter 1 where Paul writes this prayer for this church, and he says, I pray that you would know the hope to which you've been called, the riches of His glorious inheritance for His holy people, and the incomparably great power for us who believe. He says, I pray you know you have a hope like no one else has a hope, an inheritance like no one else has an inheritance, and power that is incomparable, that is available to us. And then later he goes on to says that power is the same as God's mighty strength He exerted when He raised Christ Jesus from the grave. Y'all, it is right to say that the same power that raised Jesus from the grave lives in us as Christians. There's indestructible, incomparable power available to and indwelling us if we are Christians, y'all. Isn't that incredible? Yes, sometimes we feel like we're impotent. Sometimes we're so insecure about ourselves and who we are, we feel like we can't even enter into any social environment or Zoom call or working space and even just be us. Much less feel the power to put words to our faith to people who are hurting right now, who need those words. I mean, we can't do that if we can't even just have security in who we are. Why is there that tension between what the Bible describes as true and available to us and who we are and how we feel? Why do oftentimes we abandon the truth about God and who we can be to just kind of live in a non-powerful, insecure, weak kind of way? You know, I think there's a couple of reasons, but one big one I just want to look at real quick and encourage us to walk into the fullness of, I believe, is in Galatians chapter 1. It says this. Paul says, I'm astonished that you are so quickly deserting the one who called you to live in the grace of Christ and turning to a different gospel. He says, which is really no gospel at all. Evidently, some people are throwing you into confusion and trying to pervert the gospel of Christ. And then later down, he says this, am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. Do you catch what he's saying? He's saying, church, I hate this for you. Some people must have thrown you into confusion with their voice because you're deserting the true gospel. And then in verse 10, he gives you a window into what he's saying. He's saying the true gospel is the opposite of people pleasing. He says, if I were still trying to win the approval of man, I would not be a servant of Christ. He says, winning man's approval and serving Christ are mutually exclusive and contradictory. You know why I think a lot of us are not powerful? Because we're busy trying to win people's approval. Because we're so afraid of what they might say about us and so hungry for them to say good things about us that we miss out on the power of the one who's already declared us good, y'all. I think about myself my freshman year of college and how desperately I wanted people's approval. I would change myself in any way I could just to get their approval, and that's what I was hungry for and working after. Freshman year of college, I didn't care about football a thing, but I had a bunch of friends who loved football, so I found myself not liking football at the time, completely going ham at Clemson football games. So I got a picture, let me show you this. That's right, I did have dreadlocks, and they were epic. But I would just be painted up, cheering my voice out, you know, getting a horse because I was so excited, really not about football, but I was determined to win the approval of other people. And can I tell you how it ended? Terribly. Terribly. That year, I remember feeling incredibly lonely and discouraged because I was busy trying to fit in, to win the approval of people. And I found this verse very true in my life, that in winning people's approval, I cannot serve Christ. They're mutually exclusive. But what Paul goes on to say in Galatians 1 is this about the gospel and serving Christ. I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that the gospel I preached is not of human origin. I did not receive it from any man, nor was I taught it. Rather, I received it by revelation from Jesus Christ. He goes, the true gospel is not from the mouths of humans. The true gospel is by a revelation from Jesus. That he opens our eyes to an undeniable truth, that he is good and he declares us good. The gospel is good news, meaning a verdict has already been given to us. And that verdict is we have hope. That verdict is we have an inheritance. And that verdict is we have incomparably great power. So what I believe is now has got to be a time where we go, let's get clear on the goodness of the gospel and start throwing away people pleasing. The goodness of the gospel so that I can walk into work environments, social environments, and I can be fully me because I know God is fully him and he lives inside of me. And you can share things about yourself you would never otherwise share because you're not concerned about what people think about you. Where you can be secure that God made you specially unique in his image and he redeemed you. He chose you before the creation of the world. And so you don't need to worry about other people choosing you. And then this is what I believe now is a time we have to step into as believers. A time where we have to put voice to our faith. When people are hurting right now who do not have the hope of Jesus, now is the time we got to step up and go, hey, listen, there's incomparably great power available to you. Now is the time we got to talk to that neighbor, even if it's from a distance, and share the hope that we have, that coworker. Now is the time we got to step up, take spiritual ground in our own personal life, or where we step up and take spiritual ground in the lives of others, because we know a gospel that changes people's lives, a gospel that's not from human origin. And so that's why we step up and step up.